Good evening, day walkers and night stalkers. It's me, your twisted Southern Horror Queen, coming to you live from under a full moon right here in southeastern Louisiana. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad you guys are hanging out with me tonight, but I am glad to be back home. Even though we did have a freaking blast at Pensacola, it's always good to come home to your own little mad world, right? And in that little mad world, we're making more and more progress with the new radio station. That is The Edge Radio. Yeah, you guys know all about walking on or living on the wild side and walking on the edge. See what I did there? You like that, right? Check us out at www.theedgeradio.us. There's new tunes being uploaded here and there, and a pretty good sampling going on right now of what we're going to have to offer. So I think you might just like what you hear there. And then there's even more going on in my mad little world. I am expecting that very next creepy crate to be delivered at any minute now. I love freaking out the mailman. That's awesome. It's not like he's already wigged out about having to drop off mail at the Gibson compound, but he's also subjected to delivering my creepy crate. I gotta give a huge shout out to those folks over there at the lineup. There are going to be a ton of creepy, crazy, macabre trinkets crammed into this latest crate. And God only knows what freaking bizarre places that they've been traipsing around just to find the most spooky and twisted collectibles to trip the triggers of us creepy kids, just like me, right? So you can ask Big Johnny Blender about my packing, and he'll pretty much tell you that's freaking amazing what all I can cram into a suitcase. But our friends over at the lineup, well, they seem to have the same little bizarre skills as I do, because it is insane what all they can squeeze into these little crates. If you want to find out a little bit more, of course you do, right? Go to my website. It's authorlyngibson.com. Click on the little creepy crate icon at the top right side of the homepage, and that way you can get a little bit better idea of what kind of macabre little package and what all the cool little stuff in it that's all about anyway. But remember, after you check everything out, if you do decide to subscribe, which I know you will, make sure that you use our own special little code, TWISTED, and you'll get another $5 off of your subscription. So get up off your dead ass and go check out the creepy crate at authorlyngibson.com. But wait till after the show. Hey, Susie, my good friend, and there's Freddie, glad to see you, and there is Casey Spears in the house. Susie, you're a lifesaver, honey. I just can't even tell you how you helped me hold things together. But everything's cool here on the home front. Just a little mentally and physically drained, but we're all good. Also, I got to give out my shout outs to all of the Adrian's Fury Dragster sponsors. There's, of course, Racers Direct, RJS, Surreal Studios, D&M Graphics, Renegade Racing Fuel, Hawaiian Island Shine. Love that stuff. It's awesome. Pensacola was fantastic, Freddie. We missed you there, though, dude. Let's see, who else is there? There was Hawaiian Island Shine. There's D&M, is it, maybe? K&N Filters, I think is who it is. And, of course, one of my favorites, Naked Wines. We gave out a ton of these gift certificates for these guys. If you guys want a $100 wine voucher for your first order for Naked Wines, just give me a shout out. This is an awesome product, and you can go online and kind of mix and match your case. If you want all reds, they can do that. If you want all whites, they can do that. If you want half and half, hey, they can do that too. And remember, with your first shipment, that you get $100 off of, there's free shipping. So look, check it out. You could have the mailman double duty bringing you a case of wine and the creepy crate at the same time. Watch, I guarantee you'll have a new mailman the following week. Either that or your case of wine might actually be open when you get it. Hey, Amy, good to see you. I know exactly where you're from. Clint, you been stuck in anything here recently? So I'm going to try to fill you guys in on Pensacola but it was so packed and crazy, and there were a whole lot of other things that were going on at the same times that I won't go into. So I may not actually settle down and remember everything and everybody that I met there for another whole week. But first, a big, wet, creepy kiss goes to Mike Inslee. He's the founder and the organizer of the event. And of course, he's got a massive staff that's working underneath him. And, they work around the clock for months, even before the con gets kicked off. But it is his wonderfully twisted mind that created Pensacon, and he is the devil with the pitchfork that keeps all of the minions in line. So I got to tell you guys, he did a fantastic job. And he's actually even got dates set for Pensacon 2019 with a whole bunch of celebrities that are already committed to being there. So, oh my God, he's like not even taking a break before getting the next event scheduled. That's awesome. But if you want to, keep an eye out for all the new guest announcements. You can check him out at Pensacon.com or on Facebook at Pensacon. Real easy to find those guys. So stalk them often, right? Brian Held, my boy, love that guy. If you guys don't know Brian, you need to follow him. That's another one you should be stalking. He's an awesome dude right there. So the event staff, the hotel staff were absolutely amazing. Anything and everything we wanted was just like a snap of the fingers away. The fans were freaking awesome. And of course, the celebrity guests that we ran into, they were cool as hell. We didn't have a whole lot of pictures with the celebrities because we usually ran into them after the event at the hotel, and it doesn't take very long to figure out, hey, Brian, that after the con, you've seen enough flashing cameras and all that kind of stuff, and we know that ourselves. So we were not going to be the jackasses that pointed cameras at the celebrities after hours. So we hung out with quite a few people in the bar, and Big Johnny Blunder, he's, of course, as you know, a cigar connoisseur, so he's in the smoking section. Of course, I vape, so we're both in the smoking section outside, and there are a lot of celebrities that smoke as well, but I'm not going to give them up. You'll just have to figure it out for yourself. But lots of cool people. Clint Wallingford, I already ratted you out, my dear. How are you doing? Staying loose, not tight? I'm going to leave it alone, Clint. My boy, I hope to see you this year at Night Risers in E-Town in Kentucky. Just waiting for some final dates and stuff, I believe. But looking good. Just a long ride in that truck with Big Johnny Blunder. That's kind of a hair-raising event in its own anyway. But like I said, we didn't really want to stalk the celebrities down with the cameras after hours because everybody's tired, just wanting to unwind by that time. But I think we definitely made an impression on quite a few of them, so made some more friends over there. Now, I wanted to go into this real quick. Hey, Kenya, nice to see you, sweetheart. So you guys know that Johnny Blender and myself own a powder coating business. It's called Performance Metal Finishes. And we own another business that builds rat rod chassis called Vampire Chassis, of course. I wonder who influenced the name of that business. So we are a mom and pop business, and we like to try to network a whole lot. We like to help people out and do what we can to help the little guys because we're still little guys ourselves. But, we decided, we do have a lot of big sponsors, but we decided when we started designing the 2018 fire suit for this year that we wanted to give some of the smaller businesses a chance to have their brand and their logo right up against some of the big guys like Renegade and Racers Direct and RJS and all that madness right there. Now, that would normally cost a freaking fortune. Well, because we're little guys, just like some of the other little guys out there, we know what it's like to work and try to market and advertise on a mom and pop budget. Kind of sucks, right? So here's what we decided to do. We have a prime ad space on the front part of the driver's suit that Big Johnny Blender is going to be wearing to all of his racing events. He'll be wearing it during his interviews after the racing events, hopefully when he's accepting checks for winning, and, of course, in interviews. And we will also be displaying it wherever the dragster is. It could be at a charity event, HorrorCon, Comic-Con, God only knows where the Adrian's Fury Dragster is going to show up next. But just to give you an idea, these are $20 entries. And if you guys buy 5 entries, we're going to throw a 6th one in for you. So that's 6 chances to get your brand or logo on the 2018 fire suit, which will be in front of tens of thousands and even more people, possibly into the millions. When you consider social media and how far our photos go and where our fan bases are globally, that's kind of crazy, especially if you have a online store where people can buy and have things shipped to them. Oh my God, that's advertising right there that you can't buy anywhere else, especially for 20, 40, 60, or $100. I mean, that's just crazy. So anyway, like I said, if you buy 5, we'll throw in the 6th one for you. And I'll give you a really good example. We were just talking about Pensacola. Well, here's one event where we'll be at many more just like it this year, where if that dragster or if the fire suit was on display, it could have exposed your brand or business to over 30,000 consumers this weekend. So what's up with that, right? Plenty of cons and plenty of racing events scheduled this year. The drawing's going to be pretty soon, so don't wait around. If you're interested in doing that, shoot me a message, and I'll put you in touch with Big Johnny Blender, and you guys can hook up, and you can get your entries lined up. Brian Held, if you want to see some fantastic pics from our staff photographer, please check out Pensacola 2018 album on the Weekend Geek Radio Show Facebook page. You guys write that down because you know you're going to want to see those photos, and I'm going to be stalking that later too because I know that dude took a whole lot of pictures of the dragster, and they're going to be badass, so I want to see that. Okay, so on to Pensacola. Let me tell you how this whole gig kicks off for us. So we pull into the parking lot of the Grand Hotel, which is buzzing with security. It's like a madhouse. They're not letting anybody in or out until they've taken a good look at you and everything else. So we get there, and Big Johnny Blender's getting us all situated with the security guards, and he tells them what's in the back of the trailer. And not necessarily that they had to check the back of the trailer, but when they heard there was a dragster back there, all the security guards flocked around because they wanted to see the Adrian's Fury dragster. And that was kind of awesome. We loved that. So anyway, he's dealing with them and schmoozing with all the security guards. And I decided to go in and get our reservations and our passes and all that stuff taken care of. And Mike Inslee himself, he didn't throw this off on the minions. Mike was there taking care of all the guests as they came in. He took real good care of us. It didn't take very long to get everything cleared out. I'm liking the doll in the corner. His name is Charlie. He kind of has a mind of his own, but he's a cool little dude. October, he kind of shows his ass, but hey, it's Halloween. Who doesn't show their ass in October, Gavin, right? Hey, Rhonda, glad to see you, baby. You guys drying out up there? Keep that stuff up there. We don't want any of that. Actually, we are under flood warning right now, so gotta love that, right? So while I was inside the VIP check-in, I actually ran into our friends Jeff and TK Roebuck, who we did several cons with last year. Cammie Roebuck is a very well-known cosplayer who makes all of her own costumes and sells a lot of the products that she uses in her costumes and her makeup and stuff. And if you're interested, you can see pictures of Cammie on under the past events tab at authorlyngibson.com. She is the chick that's dressed up, or she and the cupcake thief, we call him, are dressed up, standing beside the dragster in their Silent Hill costumes. Way cool. And she's got a whole bunch of different roles that she plays. So it's just really awesome stuff that she does. So we're all checked in. I've given Mike Inslee a hug and met everybody that was in there in the VIP section and our VIP room while they were checking us in. So I decided to walk back outside and check on Big Johnny Blender and see who he was hassling out there. And walk up to the truck and see you later, Brian. Walk up to the truck, and there is an inebriated Ian Beatty for Game of Thrones leaning into the cab of the truck, sitting there talking to John. And I didn't recognize him at first. I knew the face. I knew he was somebody famous, but I didn't know exactly who it was. And He's raising 9 kinds of hell because John has blamed me for leaving the coconut moonshine at home. And trust me, coconut moonshine was the last freaking thing Ian needed right then. He was wasted, but he was having a blast. And I really can't say that I blame him because the airlines lost his luggage. And had they lost my luggage, I'd have been a little bit worse than wasted at that point. But it was very cool. We hung out there in the truck for a few minutes, and eventually he stumbled away, and we were able to go inside and saw actually a couple other people that we knew from other cons and a couple other celebrities. And about 20 minutes later, headed toward the bar was again Ian Betty, who was still cussing because the coconut moonshine was back in Louisiana. It was freaking awesome. I absolutely love him. So we go upstairs and check out the room, which is really nice, and unpack, and actually grabbed a Vampire Chassis t-shirt for Ian, but he was off wandering around somewhere in oblivion when we came back down. So we hung out at the bar for a little while, grabbed a little something to eat, did a little celebrity watching ourselves, and we weren't there very long and ran into Rafe and Shannon White, who are also very awesome people. Rafe and Shannon are the twisted little minds behind Southern Geek Fest in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is a great medium-sized con to go to. I say medium-sized, it seems to be growing a little bit every single year, so it won't be long, and they may be a Pensacola that's in need of their own zip code, right, Rafe? So, like I said, while we're in the bar, we ran across a whole bunch of different people that we knew already, and then we made some new friends, too. Well, I had just about had enough socialization and decided I was going to go upstairs and unwind for a little bit, get everything situated in the room nice and organized because I am seriously OCD. So the room was set up, and John decided he was going to stay downstairs and go outside to the smoking area and have a cigar. And, of course, he runs into all kind of way cool people down there. Jason Smith's one of them. And, of course, he insulted him immediately. He's a fantastic, very, very talented artist who John immediately called a tracer. Gotta love him. Dude has no filter. It's been 18 years. I just can't seem to get him to develop a freaking filter. But anyway, day one of the con was absolutely awesome. It wasn't insane, but it was very busy and had a nice little pace to it, but it just wasn't crazy insane. And I like that because I got to spend a few minutes with each fan that came through and tell them about the books and tell them about the show and the radio station and Dragster and, of course, everything else we've got going on in the Gibson circus that we are. And that was way cool to get to know the fans, know where they're from, and find out the things that they like. And some of them that had read books had, if they liked it or not, or whatever the case may be, and then requests for, are you going to do anything like this in the future? Who knows what the future holds? I'm crazy insane. You never know from minute to minute. But anyway, like I said, everything was good that day, but when Saturday came, it was a freaking madhouse. It was insane, but it was a great insane. We loved it. And instead of talking to, one or two fans at a time, it seemed to be one group of fans at a time, but which was cool. I just got to explain things or talk about the books to a few more people than normal at once. But the best part of the day for me, Saturday was a rough day for a lot of reasons, but Friday night I had been bitching and whining back and forth to Susie Jones, my girl, that I could not find a freaking vending machine anywhere that had candy bars in it, and I was fiending for chocolate. And the issues at that point in time was it was late. Big Johnny Blender's still downstairs running his mouth, so he's not answering my text. The makeup was off. The sweatpants and t-shirt were on. The hair was in a ponytail. I was not going downstairs to the lobby because the second the elevator doors opened at the lobby, there's a mob of people standing there with cameras. We don't want that. That's a whole different level of creepy chick that I don't want the public to be exposed to. I had already lurched all around the 11th floor where we were staying, and all I could find was soda machines, and that just wasn't cutting it. So It was getting kind of close to time to break down for the day, and here came Susie with this massive bag, and inside this bag was a whole bunch of her homemade fudges. Oh my God, they were awesome, and she was such a sweetheart to take care of me and make sure that I didn't have any more chocolate issues. So, like I said, no chocolate that night. I did have to wait, but it was damn sure worth waiting for. So Susie, thank you for being a very awesome lady and for taking care of my sweet tooth and for the moral support that you gave me this weekend. But wait, there's more, just like that commercial. But wait, there's more, right? Well, after we packed it up for the night, we actually got to go out to dinner, a very nice dinner with Susie, Mike, and Bill Gibson, who owns the Christine movie car. Susie and her husband Mike take care of the car for events, and they make sure everything goes the way it's supposed to, and then it gets there where it's supposed to, and then everything's set up and all that stuff. So it's all a Christine world over there. But anyway, it was really good to sit down in a normal environment and visit with them, and I really wish we all lived a little bit closer so we could do it more often. But anyway, Susie and I are now plotting to schedule Christine and the Adrian's Fury Dragster at some of the same events. And we're both going to learn how to drive the trucks and trailers so Mike and John can ride in one vehicle together and aggravate the piss out of each other. Me and Susie can ride in the other vehicle and just have a blast. And, that way there's no testosterone corrupting the air. And yeah, Susie, I'm very motivated to learn how to drive that truck with the trailer. Hey, Chris, good to see you, honey. How's everything going? So we went back to the hotel after dinner, and I got me a nice long hot bath while Big John went out for another cigar. And, of course, he winds up spending time with folks like the cast from the Land of the Lost and a bunch of other cool folks. But all of my civility had worn off by then, and my social skills had dwindled. So it was best that I confined myself to the room at that point, which was cool. I laid back and watched some TV after a hot bath. It was all good. And speaking of that, it was absolutely crazy to get up every single morning and look down from the window of my hotel and see these people lining up. And I don't mean just 2 or 3. I mean tons and masses of people are lining up outside the event center at the ass crack of dawn. These are some committed fans, y'all, or maybe they should be committed. I don't know. But it was awesome that they were there, and they would make sure that they were getting in the door first. So that was really cool. And then Sunday, the last day of the event, got off to a pretty steady start, and then it got real, y'all. So we have the dragster under a 10 by 20 tent because she's 18 feet long and she needs room to breathe. And then I was under a 10 by 10 tent, say that 5 times fast, right in front of her. Well, all of a sudden, this big-ass black cloud starts billowing up, and the wind picks up, and it turns to like 40 degrees outside, and it's crazy. So all the vendors know the shit is fixing to hit the fan. We're all dropping the tents down and huddling down underneath them and peeking out from underneath each other and laughing and cutting up. And as these gale force winds hit us, we're holding on to the top of the tents to make sure they don't blow off. Well, Big Johnny Blunder's holding on to that big tent, and it's got enough cinder blocks on it, and everything's cool. We know it's not going anywhere. Well, as I'm hanging on to this 10 by 10 tent, which also has cinder blocks, I'm thinking, I've always wanted to parasail or hang glide, and that would be really cool. But I'm a little bitty creepy chick, and if those winds had been just a little bit stronger, I would have had the opportunity to have done that at Pensacola. It would have been all good till it came time to land somewhere. So anyway, that didn't happen, and the storm blew over. We popped the tents back up. But what was really cool is during this time, when it actually did rain a little bit, it wasn't too terrible bad. We had these medieval squires and warriors that were there. They had about 3 tents behind us, and they were doing exhibitions several times a day. Well, it just so happened that this shitstorm rolled up in the middle of the time when they were supposed to go do an exhibition. So instead of them hiding underneath their tents, They carry their weapons out to the battlefield, and they put on one hell of a show for all of us. There were a few fans standing out there in the rain, but most of us were guests and vendors that were sitting there watching, so they put on a hell of a show. We, of course, gave them a big round of applause, and they were just they were troopers. They did a fantastic job. So I got to tell you, like I said, it was an excellent con. Everybody that was there was just fantastic, from the staff, the guests, the fans. It was just off the hook. And, Big Johnny Blunder, the Adrian's Fury Dragster, and yours truly had a freaking blast. And we have to be invited back sometime again in the very near future. Also wanted to talk a little bit about the hotel that we got to stay at. It's the Grand Hotel in Pensacola. And I got to tell you guys, from the second I walked in there, I could feel all kinds of stuff around me. Not so much when we first got there, but later on when we were in the bar. And it wasn't those kind of spirits. And no, it wasn't the creepy kids or the cosplayers. These were things that I felt around me that had no pulse. They had a pulse sometime back in the day, but presently, no pulse. And the main thing that I felt was a lot of staff members that had been there for a very long time that all seemed to be very happy. And, of course, they were loyal to the Plaza Hotel and were still there on the job, making sure things got done right. So I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about the hotel. I haven't had a whole lot of time to prepare and do a lot of research, but the Grand Hotel used to be the L&N Railroad passenger depot back in 1912. And a lot of the original fixtures and materials have been restored, and they are still there today. There's a lot of cool antiques that have been added to the hotel too, like this massive chandelier. There's several massive chandeliers that came from other places, but this one in particular is just absolutely stunning. It's about 3 feet long and has stained green glass panes in it and brass on it. It's just absolutely beautiful. It was salvaged from the old courthouse. And then there's these stained glass ceilings that were once in a vaudeville theater around 1905. Those are now in the Grand Hotel. And there's some other stained glass features that came from a Victorian hotel in Pennsylvania from around 1895. And this beautiful old clock from the Kentucky State Savings Bank that was restored as well is also on site there. So when I say the walls can talk in this joint, that's an understatement, because it's the walls, the floors, the ceilings, the fixtures. Everything there has a story to tell. And I did do a quick search just to see what I could find on the haunted history at the Grand, and I did get a few hits. I saw a couple of crazy pictures that were taken by a few paranormal investigators that are there in the area. And one of them was inside the hotel. It looked like it was in the library. It was over a beautiful little marble table, but it was a white apparition that was just kind of hovering above that table. And then there was a second picture that was taken from the outside of the hotel. And this was taken during the period where a lot of these rooms were being restored, remodeled, whatever the case may be. But these levels on this particular side of the hotel were all empty at that particular time. But in the picture, it's quite vivid. There is a man, or the image of a man and the image of a woman, in two side-by-side windows at the front of the hotel. Looked like about maybe 5 stories above where that clock was. Very, very vivid, but very obvious that they were not physical beings that were standing in that window. Now, there's a whole bunch of accounts of a woman in a long old-timey dress, and then there are, of course, accounts of staff members that are still there at the hotel. So that kind of made me smile right there, because that was the first thing I felt. And, like I said, there was no dread. There was no bad feelings about it. They're happy to still be there. They love their job. Man, somebody owes them some back pay because they've been there for quite a while. But that was, like I said, one of the first things I told John when we got to the bar, that they were definitely still there all around us, and they were ecstatic that the place was busy and they were doing their job. So it was kind of cool just to have that pop up in a search after the fact. And there's Big Johnny Blender right there stalking me from downstairs. He does that frequently. Now, Susie at dinner Friday night, she was telling me about all kinds of haunted places and haunted history right there in Pensacola, and a lot of it around the hotel, as a matter of fact. Susie was the chick that hooked me up with Coon Hill Cemetery. If you guys were watching during that episode, that's some pretty crazy stuff that goes on right there in that little graveyard. Unfortunately, it's not open to the public anymore, and you will get into lots and lots of trouble if you try to get into that cemetery now. But I can't wait to check into some of the things that she told me about. I want to mention them today, but they won't be coming up again for a while, because I want to take a little bit of time and make sure I do some thorough research. But one of them was the Seville, which was maybe just a couple blocks from the hotel, from what I understand. And then there's the Church of Christ, which looks like to me has got a ton of haunted history behind it. And, of course, another cemetery, which was just on the other side of the event center. As a matter of fact, we could see it from our hotel window. And you guys know I love haunted cemeteries. It's just awesome, I think. So you guys definitely be hearing about some of those in an upcoming show, that's for sure, as soon as I've had a chance to do some thorough research. But I will tell you about one haunted joint that she told me about. I was able to do a little bit of research on it. It is a haunted lighthouse in Pensacola. Have you ever heard of that? How crazy is that? It's only like 4 hours away from me, and I never knew there was a haunted lighthouse in Pensacola. So before we get started on that, don't you guys think this would be a perfect spot for them to put a commercial? I always give them a wine break when it's time for a commercial. Actually, they just put the commercials when I take my wine break. So anyway, the haunted Pensacola Lighthouse sits about 159 feet over the coast. Now, it was originally built in 1826, but they rebuilt it in 1859 because they needed to make it a little bit bigger and a little bit taller so it could be seen from further out on the water. But there's more to this lighthouse than a history of keeping ships safe, that's for sure. This joint is still the home to several different spirits. And these dudes and dudettes like to make sure that they're seen while there's an audience present, that's for sure. So besides past caretakers and tour groups, paranormal investigations from Travel Channel, which as well as Sci-Fi's tax team did an investigation there too. The locals here are terrified of this place because it's got the reputation of being haunted because of a sinister murder that went down in the living quarters there. But the haunting does not stay confined to just that one place. It affects the whole lighthouse as well. And that's why this lighthouse has been dubbed one of America's most haunted places. Gavin says, I have been looking into different legends around the world. That's cool. Keep that up. I'm sure you're finding all kind of madness doing that. So let me tell you a little bit about this murder. Back in the day, this chick named Michaela Penbar falls in love with Jeremiah Ingram, and they go ahead and get married. Hey, Ronnie and Lori. Thank you. I appreciate that. So they decide they're going to go off and get married, like most suckers do. Anyway, shortly after that, Jeremiah scores a job as the keeper of the lighthouse. So they move in, and everything's cool for a little while. Well, then for some reason, they start having all kind of marital issues. And this is where the legend kind of branches off in two directions. Some people say that Jeremiah was abusive from get-go, and Michaela finally got fed up and started fighting back. And other folks seem to think that Michaela was the issue, that they think that Jeremiah was a little bit on the OCD side when it came to fulfilling his lighthouse duties. So Michaela was supposedly jealous because there was never enough time left over in the day for him to spend with her. So we really don't know which explanation is correct. Hell, it actually could be a little bit of both of them. So regardless of what the issue was, It was a really foggy night in 1840 when I guess she may have been pitching a bitch fit because Jeremiah may have been having to stay very alert and do his job, and maybe she was bitching too much, and maybe he got tired of her bullshit and backhanded her. Whichever it was, Michaela goes and gets a knife from out of the kitchen, and she hacks her old man to death with it. Well, this dude's deader than hell now, and he's all sliced up, but for some reason, Michaela was never convicted. So she actually spends the remainder of her days tending to the lighthouse as the keeper, and it's been said that she became so possessive and OCD about this lighthouse that she and the townsfolk both referred to it as her lighthouse. Well, old girl dies in 1855, but from what the locals say, she's still tending to that lighthouse today, and she still thinks it's hers. She does not like people traipsing through her lighthouse either, and she will pitch a bitch fit quick, fast, and in a hurry. There's tons of reports of Michaela throwing shit at tourists and that are trying to walk through the living quarters and take pictures and learn about the history of the place. Hey, Wade Cuevas. I'm not drinking moonshine tonight. I'm sorry, honey. But like I said, there's all kind of stuff that happens there. She throws things at people. And there are a lot of people who make reports of having heard their names called out in a woman's voice and in a very warning tone that kind of says, I'm watching you. Don't screw up. So there have been reports for decades, at least up until the time that the interior of the living quarters were finally refurbished, that the blood stains on the floor from Jeremiah's murder scene weren't able to ever be scrubbed up. In fact, there was this local that made a statement in an interview that he lived in the lighthouse as a child, and it had been one of his chores to try to scrub those blood stains up out of the floor. But with every attempt that was made, the stains only came back bigger and darker. So there are also reports from folks that have had encounters in the lighthouse. They say they can feel somebody following them up the stairs, and as they're doing that, they can also feel that somebody breathing down the back of their neck. But of course, when they turn around to see what the hell's going on behind them, there's never anybody there. Go figure, right? So Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters did an investigation there at the lighthouse, which is now controlled by the United States Coast Guard. And since the Coast Guard serves the United States and the citizens therein, the Ghost Hunters decided that they were going to return the favor and check out the lighthouse and give it a real thorough investigation and let the Coast Guard know exactly what it was that was going on in there. So, at the beginning of the investigation, there were a couple of members of the team that walk into the main tower of the lighthouse. Well, immediately after they walk in there, their K2 meter starts going ape shit. Well, with every single step they're taking up these stairs, this meter's fluctuating. So they stop for a minute and they think, well, maybe it's being triggered by some power source that's up at the top of the lighthouse. So they stand in place for a minute, and while they're trying to go troubleshoot and go back and forth on what it could be that was upstairs that's triggering these crazy readings, they're standing there and it's kind of quiet, and all of a sudden they hear these footsteps coming down the stairs toward them. Well, they know that nobody else is supposed to be in that lighthouse while they're doing their investigation. So they start going up the stairs to see who the hell was up there. And of course, as you probably already know, they get up to the top of the stairs and into the top of the lighthouse. There's no one there. At least not anybody that they could see with their naked eye. So a couple of the other ghost hunters go into the keeper's quarters, and that's where a lot of folks have had stuff hurled at them, and that's where they hear Michaela's voice warning them not to mess with anything. So they go through the place, and they make sure that all the windows and doors are closed and locked, and now they know for a fact that nobody else is in there. Nobody can get in there while they're doing their investigation. So once they know they're all good, they go ahead and get started. Well, one of the first things that happens is they hear this chair being slid across the wooden floor, kind of like the sound you would hear when somebody's scooting a chair back underneath the dining room table. Well, then later on, they hear the hatch slamming down on the side of the tower. So they go outside of the place just to make sure that nobody's tampering with anything. And when they get there, of course, there's no one there. So then two of the team go back down to check out the basement of the lighthouse. Now, down that basement, there have been reports of people being touched, and some people, they say that they've seen the ghost of a slave down there too. Now, I don't know what his story is, or whether he was maybe one of the folks that helped construct the tower, or maybe he was somebody that worked there and maybe actually even lived in the basement of the tower. Susie, if you're still tuning in, if you know anything about that dude, what's his story? Where did he come from? Well, like I said, I couldn't find a whole lot on him, but there are a whole lot of people that say they see him from time to time. That I was able to find. Now, it's creepy as hell down there in this basement as it is, but they go down there and they're starting their investigation there by doing an EVP session. And not very long into this EVP session, one of the investigators feels somebody touch her hair. And right after that, the other one feels somebody kind of walk by her with the draft that you feel when someone passes by. So they wait a little while longer to see if anything else happens, but nothing did. So they decided they would leave their cameras down there rolling just in case something decided to show up, like maybe the ghost of the slave. So then these other two members, they've got themselves planted in the bedroom where Jeremiah got knifed down. And there's also a rumor, or there's history, that a woman was said to have died in that same room while giving childbirth, or while during childbirth. And there's been a lot of people that reported seeing the apparition of this woman and hearing the voice of a child. So these two guys that are down there, they're definitely on the tips of their toes, and they're watching everything that's going on. Well, a little bit later, after they get situated, they're also doing an EVP session, and the two of them both hear and record a voice that sounds like a woman whispering. They also capture the sounds of footsteps and shuffling around right there near to where they were standing, but no apparition ever manifested. Later on that night, there were two more team members that thought they'd try their luck in the bedroom just to see if something would manifest for them. Well, they didn't see any shadowy figures there either, but they did manage to capture the exact same voices, shuffling sounds, and the footsteps that the first two investigators captured on their EVP session. Then there was one really awesome occurrence that went down during this investigation. So these guys are in the keeper's quarters, and they're filming. All of a sudden, their camera starts switching off and on by itself. And then you can hear these footsteps walk by them, walk to the front door. You hear the front door open, and you hear the footsteps walk out. But the camera's shooting directly at the door. There's nothing there. The door doesn't move, but it's just as plain as day what you could hear that camera captured on the audio part. So, needless to say, they pretty much formed the conclusion that the lighthouse was indeed haunted. And nowadays, there are tours available. So, if you find yourself in Pensacola anytime soon, make sure to book yourself a tour, because from what I see, there is a pretty good chance that you'll wind up having a cool encounter of your own. My Uncle DW just tuned in. Glad to see you, Uncle D. Give Aunt Wanda a big hug for me. Now, at dinner that night, Susie and I were talking about a whole bunch of different legends, and I was kind of scatterbrained that night. But she was talking about a hotel that she'd stayed in and the haunted history behind it, and it sounded a whole lot like one of the legends that was attached to the Andrew Jackson Hotel in New Orleans. Well, I couldn't remember all the details right then, so I thought I would actually refresh my memory and tell you guys all about it at the same time. Bonus, right? So here we go on that. At 919 Royal Street stands the Andrew Jackson Hotel, which is crazy freaking haunted. But it's not as much haunted there at the hotel as it is the lot that it stands on. Now, this hotel is 127 years old. I'm sure there's all kind of mad shit that's gone down in there, but this lot's got a history of its own. Let me give you a little bit of the backstory here, because it's pretty freaking interesting. So in the 18th century, New Orleans was pretty much a cesspool of filth and disease and death, with plagues and epidemics that were ravaging the freaking city. Now, child mortality rates were insane, but it was actually men between the ages of 15 and 40 that seemed to be dropping dead the most frequently. Now, the bad thing about that is that it meant that these guys were leaving behind wives and kids with nobody to support them. So needless to say, there's a whole lot of orphans roaming around the streets. So in 1792, the Spanish government built this boarding school, which was basically an orphanage, and it was built on the very same spot where the Andrew Jackson Hotel now stands. So for 2 years, these orphans had some semblance of normalcy in their lives, but if you know anything about New Orleans history, you know that shit didn't last. 2 years after the boarding school opened, this massive fire breaks out, and it takes out most of the buildings in this area, and that includes the orphanage. And unfortunately, a lot of those boys died in that fire. So after the fire, this other building was constructed there, and it was the federal courthouse. It's the same courthouse where General Jackson was indicted for contempt of court and was charged with obstruction of justice because he refused to answer questions during interrogation. Well, we all know how that turned out. He went on to be president, right? So anyway, the courthouse was there until the early 1900s. And that's nearly a century of grief and heartache. Not only those guys that were sentenced there, but also their families that were, abandoned and had to fend for themselves while their loved ones were in jail for God knows what. But that's a whole lot of emotions and drama that seeped into the building and the soil that building sat on. So remember, actually, the courthouse was demolished, and after the courthouse came down, then the Andrew Jackson Hotel went up. But as you can imagine, like we were just talking about all the stuff that went down on that lot there, that new hotel had some old baggage with it. Think back. Think about those kids that burned to death in that orphanage. Yeah, those kids are still there today, and they like to play in the courtyard in the middle of the night. And this one guest actually got one hell of a bonus visit. So he's crashed out in his room, and he reports that he was woke up in the middle of the night by the static noise that's coming from the TV. Well, he leans over to grab the remote control, and he knew good and damn well he turned that TV off before he went to bed. Well, he sits up in the bed, he aims the remote at the TV, and then he proceeds to freak the hell out. There in front of the TV, sitting on the floor, was the ghostly apparition of a little boy. So this dude starts screaming like a girl, and then all of a sudden the kid's apparition disappeared. He's only one of the guests that reported seeing and hearing these kids laughing and playing around. But it's kind of cool to know that they're reliving some of their happier times rather than being stuck in an endless cycle of their tragic deaths there. Oh yeah, and this other guest had an encounter there too. She comes out of the shower one morning getting ready to go do whatever it was that she was getting ready to do, and all of a sudden she hears this kid giggling. Well, she starts looking around the room, and then she sees her bowl of freshly poured cereal being poured onto the floor. That was pretty cool, I thought. Now, the most haunted room, supposedly, at the Andrew Jackson is supposed to be room 208. And there's all kind of crazy shit that goes on in this room, too. A lot of folks claim to see the ghost of a little boy named Armand there. Now, Armand was not one of the orphans that burned to death there in the orphanage. He chose to end his own life by jumping from the second floor balcony. But his spirit never left the hotel, and room 208 seems to be where he prefers to hang around these days. We don't really know why he decided to commit suicide, but at least he's still there and he's happy these days. Now, Armand's kind of got this thing for waking the guest up with his giggling. But other folks claim to have been shoved out of the bed by an unseen force there, and some folks have reported being woke up from a deep sleep by the covers being pulled down off of them and these cold hands touching their skin wherever it's exposed. Now, Armand's ghost has never been aggressive, and it is clear that he likes to play games with the living, but obviously Armand is not the spirit, or not the only spirit that's haunting room 208. Some guests have tried to stay in room 208 because they knew about the haunted things that go on there, but a lot of them turn back up in the middle of the night at the front desk looking to swap rooms out. And of course, the attendant's going to ask them why. Well, the most common reason they give is because they're experiencing this looming or eerie feeling that something's in that room with them watching them. But there's more than that. The lights in this room are known to switch on and off by themselves. The faucets turn on and off by themselves. Personal items are known to vanish, and sometimes they reappear in another area of the room, but sometimes they never show back up at all. It's the ghost of Armand that's likely responsible for the pranks and a lot of the paranormal activity that's in room 208. But it's unlikely that the spirit of a young child would have the ability to make somebody feel some overwhelming sense of dread or despair. And we all know here on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show that there are other things that dig thriving off of the fear of the living, right? So the hotel's also said to be haunted by the ghost of a woman. Now, a lot of folks there seem to think that she's a housekeeper or was a housekeeper there at some point in history. She's known to straighten up towels and fluff pillows and reset the furniture any way she sees fit. And it's not uncommon here to leave your room and then come back later to find that the chairs have been moved closer to the window or all the furniture has been swapped around altogether. Now, a lot of the current staff there have, they all say that they have this feeling of being watched while they're working from one time or another. Most of them assume that it is the ghost of this housekeeper, but they also hear disembodied footsteps climbing up and down the stairs all day, all times of day and the night. This poor chick is still working her ass off, even in the afterlife. Anyway, her ghost has been spotted most frequently in the lobby, but it's not uncommon to run into her in some of the other rooms on the second floor. And then, of course, there is the namesake of the hotel, President Andrew Jackson. So, according to various different accounts, the good general's actual apparition has been seen parading around the hotel, especially on the second floor. Now, when I did my research on the Andrew Jackson Hotel, I did run across a very convincing photo of Andrew Jackson on the or at the front entrance of the hotel. You cannot deny that that's him, and it's very obvious that he is not in a physical body anymore when he was photographed. It's a fairly recent photograph, I'd say within the last 5 to 10 years. So I'll try to dig that back up for you guys, or you may be able to find it on my blog. Now, besides the good general or ex-president, whatever you want to call him, there's been a lot of people that lived and died in this hotel, as well as the other known structures that have been on this lot from time to time. Now, ghostly encounters have been reported here on the grounds for a very, very long time. So, of course, it's been investigated. And I know you guys want to talk about the results of those investigations, right? So, voodoo priest Michael Bill and his associate Elaine show up at the Andrew Jackson Hotel, and they're loaded down with all their equipment. Well, Bill's the one that he says he's going to man up, and he's going to spend the night in room 208. So he's lugging all of his luggage up to the room, and he gets to the door, and he goes to try his key, and of course he's juggling his bags, but he can't get the key to open the door. So he drops all of his bags down on the ground, and he tries again, and still nothing. The lock will not budge. So he's thinking, well, maybe he's got the wrong key. So he wanders off, and he tries to find somebody with a pass key. Well, a little bit later, he comes back with a housekeeper, and she puts her key in, door props open, no problem. So at that point, they swap out keys. Well, Bill goes into the room, and he drops off his bag, and he decides he's going to go back to his car to get the rest of his equipment. Well, guess what happens when he gets back to the door? Doesn't open. So he says a little prayer, and then he pulls this small wooden cross from out of his pocket. Now, this cross has been with him on every single ghost hunt that he's ever been a part of. So he picks the cross up and he holds it to the door, and all of a sudden this cross snaps in half on its own. At that moment, he becomes aware that there is some kind of threatening presence that's standing there right beside him, watching his every move. So the investigators set up all their equipment, and they decide they're going to go leave and go on a ghost tour of the French Quarter. Well, they get back to room 208 around 10 o'clock that night. And we all know that's prime ghost hunting time, right? So they kick the night off with the EVP session. And both of these guys are sitting in the guest room with their equipment running, and they start asking questions. And, of course, they ask, is there anybody here with us? Are the ghosts of the little boys who died in the fire here with us now? Did the fire even ever happen? So the question just kind of lingered in the air, and there was this deathly silence in the room because they had turned off the AC before they started because they wanted to make sure no noises interfered with their recordings. So they're all alone in this empty room with the exception of whatever this looming thing was that was still watching them, but they heard no response to their questions. Well, they decided that they would play back the recordings just in case there was something captured that they didn't hear or they weren't able to hear on their own. And guess what? There was. There was the distinct sound of a male voice that was calling out the name Sarah as if he was hollering at her from a distance. So who was Sarah? Well, maybe the ghost of the caretaker who has been spotted by the guests on the stairwell on the second floor. So they decide they're going to try to find out for sure. They continue trying to communicate, and with every question they ask, the millimeter is going freaking nuts. And one thing was for sure, they definitely weren't alone in that room. So they keep asking questions, but this time, not only did the meters go crazy, the AC kicks on. So Bill gets up and he goes and raises the temperature on the thermostat again. And make sure that everything kicks off, and then they start their questioning again. So the first question they asked is, have you been here a while, Sarah? Well, the temperature in the room starts to drop, and again, the AC cuts back on. So he gets up again, and he turns the thermostat up to 80, but now the room is freezing freaking cold, and the lights start flickering off and on. But shortly after that, everything kind of went quiet, and Sarah stopped responding. Now the equipment's all laying there dormant and the AC was staying off. So Bill and his partner decided they were going to switch up and try to start contacting the ghost of one of the boys that was attached to the hotel. Well, later on that evening, they did. There was a little boy's voice that was, of course, followed by the frequently reported giggling that was broadcasted through the spirit box. So they decided to start questioning again. And they asked, are you Thomas, one of the little boys that died in the fire here? Well, at first there was no response, and then suddenly there was a distinctly chilling answer. It said, we are hiding. So they realized that it sounded like there was a group of children, not just one that was responding. So Bill asked, well, where? We can't find you if we don't know where you are. Can you give us a hint? The answer was, come and find us in the back of the house. Well, there was one last EVP, which they could only make one wonder, what exactly was going on with these kids there. There was one of the kids' voices that was clearly heard saying in a very desperate voice, save us. So the next day, Michael goes out to see if there was anything back behind the house. And of course, there's a shed that's out there that's used for storing stuff for the hotel. But it's recent. You can tell it hasn't been there very long. So he goes around to maybe the courthouse or libraries or whatever and starts doing research on this hotel. And he finds out that in 1896, there was a barn there. And it actually appeared on map records all the way back to the 1780s. So if that was the out back or behind the house that was being referred to by this ghost child, obviously it's not there anymore, but it was kind of cool to be able to see that there had been something recorded there since the 1780s. As far as Sarah, nobody by the name of Sarah ever lived on the grounds, but across the street, there was a family of Sicilian immigrants, and in the 1940 census, there was a woman between the ages of 42 and 45 that lived there, whose name was, shockingly, Sarah. Well, the census listed her as being employed, but it doesn't say where. And I think it'd make pretty damn good sense if she was working across the street from where she lived at, wouldn't you? I'd even say it makes sense if the investigators recorded the male voice calling out for her. Probably it was a past owner or past manager of the hotel that was calling across the street for Sarah to get her ass to work, wouldn't you think? So with the amount of activity that was experienced on Michael and Elaine's first visit, of course, there was a follow-up investigation that was scheduled. Now, this time, there were a ton more of investigators on site with a whole bunch more equipment. And that's a good thing there were, too, because the activity gets kicked off before the ghost hunt even starts. At 7 o'clock that night, the team was starting to gather together in the courtyard, and they're all getting organized for the hunt and everything. Well, everybody's all engrossed in the planning and who's going to investigate where and what equipment everybody's going to use. Well, this chick comes hauling ass down the stairs, and she starts hollering. She's pissed. Who the hell brought a child with them to this ghost hunt? Well, everybody's kind of looking around at each other and shrugging their shoulders. Michael turns around and tells her there's no kids allowed at this hotel. Well, the chick's face was blood red from having haul ass down the stairs, and she was pissed off as it was. Well, now that red face has turned absolutely white, and she starts explaining to the group that had gathered there what had just happened to her. She says that she had just opened her door and she was getting ready to leave her room to come and join the rest of them down there in the courtyard, and she felt somebody tug on the back of her shirt. And she knew there wasn't anybody else in that room with her, so she turned around to see what the hell was going on, and all of a sudden this little boy runs past her and out onto the balcony and disappeared. Michael and Elaine were both certain that this had been the spirit of the boy Thomas that they had encountered on their first investigation. And so everybody was off to that room. So Michael and Elaine and these other two investigators get their asses back up to 208 because obviously Thomas was on the prowl and he wanted to make contact with somebody. So these four investigators are sitting in room 208 and they kick it off with another EVP session just like last time. Well, Bill asks, "Are you here, Thomas?" Well, a couple of seconds later, they hear this faint voice break through the white noise of the voice box, and it says, "Here." So Bill makes a few adjustments to the equipment, and he calls out again. He says, "I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Are you here, Thomas?" And this time the voice came through real clear, and it says, "I can't find you. I'm scared." So over the next few minutes, there were several disturbing messages, and not what was being said necessarily, but it was the fear that was coming from this ghost child's answers, the panic that you could hear in his voice. And there were only a few other discernible words that were able to be made out on some of these last EVPs, and lost and afraid were, of course, two of them. So the team were trying desperately to calm this ghost child down, but nothing seemed to work. And the room remained active the entire time that they were there. But oddly, at the same time, another one of the team was having an encounter with something or someone in her own room. Now, she was in the bathroom putting on her makeup, and she had set her makeup bag down on the toilet seat and turned back around in the mirror to put on her mascara. Well, all of a sudden, the faucet in the tub turns on, and her makeup bag goes flying across the bathroom, and its contents are spilling out in a trail behind it as it slams up against the far wall. Well, further down the way, same floor, Missy and her husband, Larry, which are also with the investigative team, they're in room 202. And that's where they had planned to spend the night and do their investigation. Well, they kicked off their own EVP session, and they were now in contact with a ghost that was named Nick. Well, Nick quickly became infatuated with Missy, and his voice was coming through loud and clear, and every comment was geared towards Missy. I mean, this dead dude is hitting on her. So Larry, her husband, speaks up and tells Nick that, hey, I'm staying right beside her all night long. And just in case you were getting some kind of crazy ghost stalker ideas, Well, Nick tells Larry that he had every intention on staying in the room next to her all night too. So Larry and Missy decide to switch rooms. They'd already been successful in contacting and communicating with a ghost. No sense in pushing it, right? So they moved down to room 204. And at that point, one of two things happened. Either they pissed old Nick off and he came with them, or they ran up on some other entity altogether. But this one was hostile, and it emitted a very dark and daunting air. So they're in the new room, and they start off with a new EVP session, and no sooner had they started, they start hearing these noises in the bathroom. All of a sudden, this big black misty figure comes from out of the bathroom, and it's standing in the doorway looking straight at them. So the room fills up with this dark, cold feeling, and obviously something negative had been summoned during their session, that's for sure. Well, this dark figure, in the blink of an eye, transforms into a light orb and shoots across the room and disappears, and then everything goes silent. It was gone, but now they'd had two very memorable and documented experiences during their hunt. So the investigation was starting to wind down, and Michael decided to head to his room. Well, he had high hopes in trying to find out why Thomas had told him to go look for him in the back of the house. So he decided to stay in room 211, which was actually at the back of the property. Now, the room itself was on the second floor, and it was accessed by this narrow carpeted stairway. Well, by the time he gets there, Michael's exhausted. He crawls into bed, and he's just about to doze off, and he hears the door creak open. So he was so tired, he didn't even bother picking his head up. He just laid there, and he's hollering out, "Elaine, is that you?" Well, a few minutes later, he hears footsteps coming up the stairs, and he hollers again, "Elaine." Then he hears the bathroom lights click on, and he's like, "Screw it, I'm not picking my head up." And he calls out again, "Elaine," and nothing again. So he says, "Just turn the damn lights out when you leave." So then the bathroom lights go out. So he's laying there in bed, and he's waiting to hear the sounds of footsteps going back down the stairs and the door creaking as it closed. Well, there was no sound at all. So now he's confused, and he's wide awake. And he gets out of bed, he turns the lights on, no one's there, nothing's been disturbed, and then it hits him that he has the only key to the room. So I'd say it was a pretty productive ghost hunt, wouldn't you guys? It's a shame that Michael didn't turn on some of the equipment in his room before he decided to crash for the evening, because I'm pretty certain he would have caught something on video or EVP had he done that. But hey, hindsight 2020, right? So I'm glad you guys joined me tonight. Glad you hung out with me. I'm sorry I'm a little bit scatterbrained this evening, but hey, I'm having a blind night. Sometimes we can do that. But anyway, if you need more creepy in between now and next Tuesday, you can always stalk me at authorlyngibson.com, where you'll find my books, my blogs, pictures from past events, pictures of all kinds of crazy things. Make sure you check out the Adrian's Fury Dragster tab. That has our potential schedule for the rest of the year, but that's always going to change. It most certainly will from week to week, it seems like. But anyway, like I said, thanks for hanging out with me. Until next Tuesday night, you guys keep it creepy, because you know I will.